Welcome to the Busy Pastor Podcast. If you're interested in leadership and ministry coaching, go to busypastor.org/coaching. Join the Busy Pastor community today by going to busypastor.org, filling out the form, and you will receive more free resources, starting with our Fab 5 resource, helping you determine the 5 things only you can do. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining us for the Busy Pastor Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Trent and Stewart, as always.
How's it going?
And today's going to be an exciting episode as we talk about the power of the big day. This has been an important part of the life of Foothills Church for 12 years.
Yeah.
And so I think all the thoughts and principles behind this are going to be really important and pretty practical for our listeners. And so let's just get into the first question. What is a big day?
What is a big day? Well, a big day can be really anything that you want to make it. But for us, the big days have just been more evangelistic.
Right.
They've been more relational, fun, those types of days where, you know, you're putting a little bit more into the overall experience on a Sunday. You're really encouraging people to invite lost friends, people that don't know the Lord or go to church anywhere. And so that becomes a focus, and, you know, giving people that opportunity to invite them to something where we're going to preach the gospel and it's going to be a fun day. And usually, you know, in the history of the church, you know, back in the day, you called them, you know, high attendance Sundays, pack a pew. You know, some people call them invite your one days.
Right.
You know, there's tons of different ways to theme it out or to talk about it, but it's basically, you know, where you're trying to get people to invite lost people to church, hear the gospel, and give people an opportunity to receive Christ.
Yeah. And so we've got 8 principles behind the power of the big day. And so we thought we would just begin to walk through that with you. And so let's talk about the first principle.
Yeah, the first one is really be strategic about the timing. And so you don't want to do this in the month of May, most likely, because
right after Easter.
Yeah. Or, you know,
that's a big day in and of itself.
Yeah. Right. The dead of summer when everybody's traveling. So you want to be strategic. And there are obviously some certain days that are already built in, like you just mentioned, Easter. Easter is going to be a big day. It's already built in. So you want to go ahead and grab that. Christmas is one of those days that you just want to kind of assimilate those 2 days in the overall, you know, rhythm of your you know, structure. And so really you're looking at 4, maybe 5, you know, big days out of the year that you give extra attention to and an extra theme behind to really give people something, you know, to invite friends to. You know, you could do it 6 times a year, but if you do it too often, then, you know, the people kind of get burnt out on it, and it becomes harder to build momentum.
It loses the intentionality.
You lose some of that intentionality and you know, energy behind it. So you really want to, I would stay around 4 or 5, you know, at the most.
But before we go on to the next one, how far in advance are we planning for these days?
At least 12 months.
Okay.
So we're 12 months planned as far as our sermon calendars. And I think that's important because it's important for me to know where we're going, what I'm doing. And it's important for our staff to know what those days are as well, because they have a lot to get prepared for, you know, as well. And so, you know, as we get closer to that day, 13 weeks is really that first meeting to talk about that upcoming big day, you know, to really have that creative and really get nuts and bolts down. And so that's when we would really dive into the, you know, the X's and O's of that day, but it's on the calendar 12 months out.
Yeah. And so 12 months beforehand, you know, it's on the calendar, and then we begin our process of preparing, and which really is the second point here.
Yeah. And so you got to get prepared,
you
know, and so you can't just say, you know, bring a friend. You really need to prepare. And so, you know, in order to do that, you've got to create what comes around it, you know? So the sermon, yes, you know, evangelistic, but what else makes that day special? And so you've got to get prepared for that. So, you know, what are some of the resources you want to give? What are some of the fun pieces of the day that you want to bring around that? You know, this is not like some people might criticize a big day and say, oh, well, you're just trying to, rope people into coming to church, or you're trying to, just trying to use all these external things to get, beg people to come to church. And that's ridiculous in my mind. People who are lost in our community will be more likely to attend when a friend says, hey, come to Sunday this week. We're going to have some inflatables, or we're going to have food. We're going to have this. You can enjoy, the service. And then we're going to have this other piece. And it's like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. That sounds like something I might, come to. Whereas just a normal Sunday, those people, may not respond to an invitation. And so in order to get prepared, you got to figure out the theme and what fun things are going to be around that.
Right.
And then, start preparing for how you're going to get people to invite people to church. And, what's the prayer around this event look like? How are small groups involved in this invitation? Are you going to give people handouts in order to invite friends? Are you going to advertise this in the community somehow? What kind of videos might come around, an event like this to promo on social media that you might promote? So all of the pieces, you've got to begin to get prepared. So you can't just say, hey, let's do it next week. You've got to really, I would say at least, 13 weeks out, start to really brainstorm what that day for you is going to be.
Yeah. And so when you're prepared like this, you mentioned a moment ago, it gives your people an opportunity to invite someone, right? Someone in their life, whether it's a friend or neighbor or a family member. And I think that's so important because you're giving them permission to practice the power of invitation.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about that principle, the power of invitation, that is what God uses in all of our lives for every single one of us to take our next step with Him, right? The power of invitation to salvation from Him, but even on a human level. I mean, every single one of us, even probably listening, could name all the people in our life that God has used to invite us to something, whether it's a small group or a Sunday service or an event.
Yeah.
So when you strategically put energy and bandwidth and resources around something like this, not only is it a great day for your church, but like you said, it's really an opportunity to equip your people on how to invite and to be intentional all the way up to that point.
Absolutely. It gives your people permission to invite them to something as well. Whereas, they might be a little hesitant because they don't know what you're going to preach about. You might be preaching a message, on money or giving. And like, I don't want to invite my lost friend to that message, So you're really giving them the permission to say, hey, this is the week that I'm going to share the gospel, and we're having your lost friends in mind when we're, preaching and when we're leading this day. And so that's a huge part of teaching your people to be evangelistic. And then of course you're also asking them to pray for that person.
Right.
And those people. So absolutely. And this really is something that's kind of stirs in the community as well, because as you're advertising, as they're seeing this in the community and on social media, as neighbors are having these conversations, it becomes a little bit of a buzz in your community about, oh, well, they're having this day this week. And so, all of those signs are well-intentioned, good intentions to get people who don't know the Lord in a situation where they can hear the gospel clearly.
Yeah. I think that's so important, especially when you think about this lane of preparation. Just one more thought on this, because think about your neighbors, right, who have kids.
Yeah.
So family members who have kids, and the power of invitation there to say, hey, come to church on Sunday. We're going to have inflatables for the kids. There's food for the family, and there might be 4, 5, 6 other families that know, this family in your neighborhood. So you're really preparing.
They say it takes 6 invitations or 6 points of contact before someone will actually either come to church or, in the business world, to buy your product. It's at least 6 points of contact. And so you might invite them, somebody else might invite them. They might see a promo video online. They might receive a mailer in the mail, and so it takes 6 usually. And so when we keep that in mind too, that's where you're like, well, it takes a village, to reach people.
Absolutely.
And multiple touches in order to encourage people to, actually step foot on your campus.
Yep. And so we're praying, we're preparing well in advance. We're thinking strategic about the timing of a big day. So not right after Easter, not right before Christmas. We're looking at our calendars and our context to say, okay, where can we put these days that there might be lulls?
Yeah.
Right. And they're going to be strategic ways to facilitate some of this stuff. And so what's the third point?
Well, before I go to the third point, so on your thought there, so for us, we're going to do one in August when school starts back.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a big momentum day. And then we're going to do one later in the fall, which is another good push after we have fall break. And
everybody's back in town.
Everybody's back in town. And so that gives us a big boost. And then, of course, naturally, you've got Christmas.
Right.
And then naturally you have Easter. And so those are the 4 times that we actually do it. And this by no means replaces our training, equipping, encouraging people to do personal evangelism.
Right.
But this is just another side of the coin that obviously, we want to use as a part of reaching people with the gospel. So
yeah. And I love the day, coming back out of the summer because everyone's back in town.
Yeah.
Everyone's back in school. And now people are looking for churches and we can really, catalyze on that
getting
part
back
of the
in
calendar.
those school rhythms and all of that.
Yeah. So also a great point. So now moving to number 3. So what's number 3 when it comes to these principles of behind the power of big day?
Yeah. So you want to have a day of excellence. And so you really want to bring, put your best foot forward, and so whatever that looks like for you, you just want to do the best that you can with the resources and the people that you have. Yes. And so, it means that nobody on staff's taking a vacation on this day. It means, your best singers are singing. It means, everybody's getting their best volunteers on that day. And so everybody is collaborating as a staff, as volunteers. And so you're just putting your best foot forward. And that includes me as the pastor, as the communicator that day. I want to be prayerful, mindful about the sermon that I would ask God to give to me and do my very best on that day, as well as whoever's bringing the announcements, who's ever, all of those pieces, you know, if you're going to have a video, if you're going to have any kind of other component in the day, you want it to be really clean and polished. And so, giving it your best day, you want to knock it out of the park as best as you possibly can. And so, that's just what excellence means.
You mentioned a moment ago the intentionality behind advertisement and marketing.
Yeah.
So you're preparing to get this out into the community. I mean, that type of excellence is gonna tell your community kind of how you even think about excellence or your neighborhood or your city. And even the promo and advertisement and marketing that you do to prepare and to plan for something like this. So from the beginning, excellence has to kind of be our guardrails in how we're even putting something like this on.
Yeah. So you want a good theme wrapped around that. It's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a theme that is kind of hokey or weird, or maybe an offensive thing, you don't want flames and the turn or burn theme kind of coming through on that, because your goal is to really connect with people that aren't in church.
Yeah.
And so, you want that excellence to even come out in whatever logos, promo pieces that you're putting out there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And your themes can be contextual to your city, to your area, to your neighborhood, or a season of the calendar. Yeah. Like we talked about, this back to school kind of event that you might do. Let me ask a question around excellence. So when you're planning and preparing and praying about a big day, and you're thinking about this lens of excellence, do you bring in worship leaders, or do you bring in speakers from the outside? And how are you thinking about that? I mean, you as the lead pastor, are you also carrying the weight of a big day and the normal preaching calendar? How do you think about that?
That's a good segue into the next point. So
it's almost like I planned it.
You planned it. Because actually, I would encourage you to, yes, you be the one that preaches. You want a consistent, look and feel.
Yes.
And so you don't want to bring in some guy who is, just a ringer preaching his best sermon and comes in, everybody just loves him and falls in love, and maybe decisions are made, but the next week, you're up.
Yeah, joke's on them, right?
Yeah, they show back up and they're like, oh, well, where's the guy that was funny, and where's the guy that was this and that? It's like, well,
that's a great point.
This is what you get when you come to FC, like it or not. This is what I got. I'm giving my best every week,
right?
And so, I want to be the guy that's actually preaching the gospel, and that's good for me too, because I want to make sure I'm always, preaching to lost people and have that mindset that I'm not just preaching to the, the people that have been at our church for years. I'm preaching to the Hindu that came with his wife, or I'm preaching to the guy who's never been to church before, just got out of prison, and he's looking for hope. I want to keep my mind in that world too, not just focused on, the small group leader guy that I know is going to be there. So I want that consistency to be there. So I don't invite people to come and speak. We don't get, people to come in to sing that aren't normally going to be on the stage, because the goal, if you want to be consistent, you want to bring them back. Exactly. And you want them to continue to come back.
Right.
And so that would be the goal. And if next week looks different, and it's, it's definitely going to be different than a big day, but if it's so different that it's a different speaker and different music and different everything, then people are like, well, that wasn't, what I signed up for. I was signed up for that. And so I would just say, be you, and let your team be your team, and do the best with what you've got.
Yeah, that's such good insight. I think the meat behind an attractional day like that, if you could even call it that, is the attraction of the relationship that they're already in with the person who invited them. Oh, I can be a part of this community. This is a new community for my children. Oh, I saw this, promotion or this social media post or whatever. And that those 6 touches are happening alongside the personal invite.
Yeah.
But then also the attraction is the gospel, right?
That's it, right?
Because 100 times out of 100, a non-Christian is not going to know or care about the guest speaker that you bring in.
No.
I don't care how famous they are in Christian
They won't know
subculture.
them.
They won't know them. And as you said, the audience, right, of the power of the big day type of event is your neighbor, or your church attenders or members, neighbors or friends or family, the community. Right, non-Christians to hear the gospel, to have an opportunity to respond. That's the most important thing.
It's the most important thing. And so when you're talking about the extra stuff, the fun outside stuff, we're not talking like you don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on all of that fluff. You just need some. Just do a little bit, whatever that looks like for you. And, come up with a budget. What can we do with this budget? And have some other pieces to the puzzle to give people something to do, to give their kids something to do. And ultimately, why? Well, that parents can just sit and talk and have some relational time while their kids are doing that. That's basically, what you're trying to do. And food is always a good thing to add to anything. It just brings that fellowship and camaraderie and just gives you relational time with people. And that's really what it is. And just kind of on another note, when you're talking about other speakers or whatnot, in our day and time when anybody can download a message from any popular guy around the world or podcast a guy, like they have access to all of that teaching on their own now. But what they don't get is they don't get a personal pastor who wants to shepherd and offers to shepherd them and know them and to know their kids, and to provide the community of believers, the church, to be able to do ministry in the context of their community and allow them to be a part of that gospel-centered community outreach ministry that they can be a part of the mission. And so I think in this world where everybody has access to all these great speakers, the one thing they still can't get from those people is you, pastor. They don't get your voice, your communication, your love, your shepherding, and the opportunities that you can give them to make a difference in their community. And so I think that is where we've got to lean in.
That's where we have to lean in. And that's where we need to lean in as pastors too. So if you're not the lead pastor and you're listening to this podcast, I mean, for example, for me, I am not the lead pastor at Foothills Church, but people ask me all the time, who are you listening to?
Yeah.
And I listen to two guys. I listen to Tim Keller and Trent Stewart because I like Tim. I've listened to him for a long time, but Trent Stewart's my lead pastor.
Yeah.
And those are regardless of kind of who you're listening to, great. Get those supplemental voices, but be influenced the most by the vision and the voice of what God's doing through your pastor.
It's good.
And so I think that applies, especially in the power of a big day.
Yeah.
Be the guy who brings the gospel, who prepares faithfully, and watch what God's going to continue to do.
And just be you. You
Exactly.
don't have to try to be funny if you're not funny. You don't have to try to be something you're not on these days. Just be you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to part 1 of the Busy Pastor podcast on the power of the big day. As we close today's episode, we want to invite you to do a few things. First, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Busy Pastor. And secondly, if you like today's episode, subscribe to The Busy Pastor and leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. The Busy Pastor podcast is produced by Marcus Bowling, video production Jake Tipton, audio engineer Brian Papik, and graphics by Zach Shaddix. We'll see you next time here at the Busy Pastor podcast for part 2 on the power of the big day. Until then, let's be busy with the right things. Thank you so much for tuning into our YouTube page. Hit subscribe, share it with your friends, and don't forget to comment below.
New episodes come out every Thursday. For more content and to join the Busy Pastor community, visit busypastor.org.